We're now moving to question time. Senator Wong.
I seek leave to make a statement concerning ministerial arrangements.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Thank you, Senator Wong.
Senator Farrell will be absent from question time today for personal reasons. In his absence, ministers will represent portfolios at question time in accordance with the letter circulated to you, President, and to party leaders and independent senators.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. One Australian told the Cost of Living Committee that the mortgage is going up month after month, while at the same time no extra income is coming in. In addition, the rising cost of electricity and gas, which is harder to budget for because of the price fluctuations, and food is making the weekly budget stress less further than it did in the past. The inaction by government, particularly in areas where they can make a difference, is so frustrating. Another said interest rates impact our mortgage, inflated food prices at supermarkets, massive energy costs. These are our three biggest, and as part-time workers we are impacted terribly. The Prime Minister said that he had a plan for cheaper electricity and cheaper mortgages. Minister, will your government admit that to these Australians and to those like them that you have failed to deliver cheaper energy and cheaper mortgages?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hume for the question. And the government understands that many families, many households across Australia are doing it tough in this high inflation environment. It is an environment that is affecting countries around the globe, and it's certainly making it harder for Australians to make ends meet here, which is why our biggest priority since coming to government has been trying to take the pressure off cost of living where we can without adding to the inflation problem. And you would have seen from the budget, and indeed you would have seen from the measures we took, that Senator Hume asked about energy prices. Well, our energy bill relief, which those opposite voted against. I mean, these are the hypocrites. They come in here and vote against a $3 billion energy bill relief and other sensible interventions to deal with the energy crisis we inhabited, and then vote against it, and then come in here and say that people are struggling with their energy bills.
Senator
I mean,
Henderson.
you can't vote against something and then come and complain that the government isn't doing anything on energy bills, when that's exactly what we did. We recalled the parliament, we brought everybody back here, and thankfully we were able to win the support of the parliament to get that measure through, and that will flow through to people's winter energy bills.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senators Henderson and Hughes, I have called you to order on a number of times. I should not have to repeat myself. Your constant interjections are disorderly. I'm requesting that you cease. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you. Where we've made decisions on cheaper medicines, for example, we've got the opportunity for those opposite to endorse the policy that we are implementing through community pharmacy on cheaper medicines, so that people can save hundreds of dollars a year on what they're currently spending on medicines, on cheaper childcare, on our investments in Medicare. These are all investments where we can take the pressure off people's budgets without adding to the inflation problem in our economy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Prime Minister said in his 2023 New Year's resolution was to deal with the cost of living. Since the new year, the RBA has hiked interest rates 4 times, including directly after Labor's budget, a total of 100 basis points, which has added thousands to the annual cost of average mortgage repayments. Minister, do you think the Prime Minister is succeeding in his resolution?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, the Prime Minister's priority is the cost of living, taking pressure off cost of living for Australians. That has been his #1 priority since becoming Prime Minister, and it's something that he's focused on every single day. And I know because I work very closely with him. And as we put the budget together, as we put together other sensible measures where we can to take that pressure off households, we understand that people are doing it tough. We understand that, which is why We've been so surprised by those opposite in the positions that they've taken when we have brought those measures to the parliament, including on energy bill relief, including on cheaper medicines, in those areas where we can make a difference. And I would note, because those opposite keep trying to allege something that didn't happen, which is the Reserve Bank actually acknowledged that our budget took pressure off inflation.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Prime Minister before the election said, "I'll say this very clearly, Australians will be better off under a Labor government." Now, families today are paying around $22,000 a year more in their mortgage repayments.
Senator Hume, please resume your seat. Order on my right. Equally, when a senator is on her feet asking a question, she's entitled to ask it in silence. I'm going to ask Senator Hume, please begin again. Thank you. Start the clock.
Thank you, Madam President. The Prime Minister said before the election, "I'll say this very clearly, Australians will be better off under a Labor government." Families are today paying around $22,000 a year more in mortgage repayments. Energy bills are up by 22%, and inflation will continue to run rampant for years, according to the RBA. Minister, isn't it true that most families today are worse off since Labor came to government?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
No, that's not correct, and those opposite will understand that the Albanese government, and I think Australians understand that the Albanese government governs in their national interests, not in the secular interests of the Liberal Party, which is what the arrangement was under the former government. We have got wages moving. We are implementing cheaper medicines, strengthening Medicare, energy price relief plans, support for vulnerable Australians, cheaper childcare, extending paid parental leave, more affordable housing, fee-free TAFE, and we've been doing that despite the best efforts of those opposite to say no to everything. They say no to absolutely everything. Any policy which addresses cost of living pressures, those opposite say nothing, and then they come in here and whinge about it. Yep. You're so irrelevant. You're so able to tear things down, to wreck things, to tear things down, while we are dealing with the issues that the Australian people need us to address.
Thank you, Minister. Once again, senators, particularly on my left, I had to call for order several times. I'm asking you to listen respectfully. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister outline how the Albanese government is making medicines cheaper for Australians? And how will a move to 60-day prescriptions further assist Australians face cost of living pressures and improve the health of people with ongoing health conditions? And what reception has the policy received from doctors and health consumers?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Walsh for a question and for the opportunity to talk about another one of our policies, which goes right to the heart of addressing some of the cost of living pressures households are experiencing right now. In January this year, we delivered the largest cuts to the price of medicines in the 75 years since the Chifley Labor government established the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme. The general co-payment was reduced from $42.50 to $30. And in the first 6 months of this year, Australians have saved $120 million on over 11 million prescriptions. That's $120 million in savings. We are determined to do more to help Australians with cost of living challenges they are facing, and that's why we announced in the budget that we would move to 60-day prescriptions for a select group of medicines for people who have ongoing health conditions where their doctor approves it. This will mean around 6 million Australians with ongoing health conditions will be able to access 60 days' worth of medicines at the same price that they currently pay for 30 days' worth of medicines. This will mean for 6 million Australians who have ongoing health conditions, it will effectively be halving the cost of getting certain medicines, halving the cost, and estimated that Australians moving to those arrangements will save $180 per medicine each year. Wow. And this policy, importantly, President, is based on the expert advice provided to the government by the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee. 60-day scripts are already in place in New Zealand, Canada and the United Kingdom.
Order.
The AMA says this is a win for patients that should lead to better medicine adherence and ultimately better health outcomes with reduced pressure on the health system. I think, based on those comments, this is something that all of us in this place should support.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh for supplementary.
Thank you, President. Is the minister aware of why this policy hasn't been introduced earlier? And has there been any reaction from the health sector to the Coalition's continuing opposition to 60-day dispensing?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the opportunity to answer that question. Well, the previous government was provided with this advice to move to 60-day dispensing back in 2018, some 5 years ago. And what happened? What happened? Well, they ignored it. They did nothing. That's right. They did nothing. Just like the entire decade of them.
Order. Order. Order across the chamber. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. This means that for the last 5 years, millions of Australians have paid hundreds of dollars more than they actually needed to for their medicines. Only the former government can explain why they decided to keep the cost of medicines higher than they needed to be for longer than they needed to be. The AMA has called out the opposition on this. At a time when many people are struggling with cost of living pressures, the public positioning of the Coalition on 60-day dispensing suggests they are intent on having patients continue to absorb unnecessary financial pain with all the negative consequences that brings.
Senator Henderson, once again, I've called you to order. As I've said to senators on many occasions, there is ample opportunity across the sitting week for you to make a contribution. Question time is not the time. Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Minister, how does the Community Pharmacy Agreement provide support for pharmacists to provide services to Australians? Is the government planning to extend the existing agreement?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Yesterday, the Minister for Health announced that the government will soon commence negotiations for an 8th Community Pharmacy Agreement. This agreement supports patient access to PBS, subsidised medicines, programs and related services through community pharmacies across Australia. In the budget, we announced that savings from 60-day prescriptions will be reinvested into community pharmacy, and we are delivering on that commitment. Every single dollar saved by the government under this measure will be reinvested back into community pharmacy to ensure the ongoing strength of this essential sector. This includes by doubling the total budget of the Regional Pharmacy Maintenance Allowance, increasing the budget for community pharmacy programs, introducing nationally consistent pharmacy payments for opioid-dependent treatment services, broadening funding for a number of immunisation program vaccines, increasing the Regional Pharmacy Transition Allowance and increasing payments for services like dispensing, handling, admin and infrastructure by 7% more for all community pharmacies.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash.
Prime Minister Senator Wong. Minister, over the past week, the government has repeatedly criticised the opposition for wanting to talk about matters other than the Voice. So I'd like to ask the government some specific questions about how the Voice will work. How will the different Indigenous groups represented by the Voice resolve internal differences? Will they vote like a parliament? Will they give multiple dissenting opinions like a court? Or will they be required to reach consensus like a treaty negotiation?
Order. Order. Minister Wong.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about the Voice, which, as the senator well knows, were the referendum to pass, that she and other people, other senators in this place, would be part of resolving how. Well, you would be part of resolving how this works.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Cash, you've asked your question. Senator McKenzie and Senator Canavan. The minister is entitled to be heard in silence. That is what I'm requesting. Minister Wong, please continue.
As I said, the senator well knows that were the referendum to be passed, that those in this chamber get the opportunity, as members of Parliament and the Senate, to resolve the sorts of matters that she is describing. One hears what Senator Cash says, and what I'd say to Senator Cash is that Mr Dutton and Senator Cash are really continuing the legacy of Scott Morrison, always putting the political interest ahead of the national interest. And you know why
Minister
they talk
Wong,
about—
please resume your seat. Order on my left. Order. Senator Cash, you've asked your question. Please allow the minister to answer. Senator McKenzie, that includes you. Order across the chamber. Interjections across the chamber are particularly Senator Canavan. Please continue, Minister Wong.
They want to talk about everything except what the Voice does, because they know Australians wouldn't find the current situation experienced by Indigenous Australians acceptable. There was proof this weekend.
Minister Wong. Senator Cash, what is your problem? I have called you to order several times. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator O'Sullivan. I should not have to call senators individually. You've asked your question. The minister is answering it. Listen in silence. Minister, please continue.
And if you want any proof of their intentions other than observing this chamber, listen to what comes out of their own mouth. Mr Curry of the Financial Review reported that one coalition MP told him that we can't win the election unless we defeat the Voice solidly, i.e. we need to defeat it to get to the election starting line. Now, if you ever wanted an example of why Scott Morrison's leftovers are still continuing his legacy, it's that message to Phil Corey.
Senator Wong, order. 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 Minister Wong, please continue.
Well, I hear—
Minister Wong, I'm
sorry.
Senator Sterle, I have just called the chamber to order and then you immediately call out. That is disrespectful. Minister Wong.
And from Senator McKenzie, pathetic. Well, you know what's pathetic? That's pathetic. To say we can't win the election unless we defeat the Voice solidly. You know what that shows? You learned nothing. You learned nothing from what Australians won at the last election. You continue the Morrison-Dutton legacy of always looking to your own interest, never the national interest.
Has expired. Order. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Specifically focusing on the Voice once again. The government has committed to ensuring that Voice representation is gender balanced and will include youth, and has told the Senate Voice members will be elected. Which Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander electorates will be required to have a youth member represent them?
Order. Order. Before I call the minister to— Senator Cash, I haven't even called the minister and you are already interjecting. Across the chamber, Senator Watt as well. Order. I'll remind you the minister has the right to be heard in silence. Minister Wong.
Well, I'd refer to Mr Leese's comments in a speech he gave, because there are people on your side who support this. He made the point— I know that you don't like it that there are those on your side who might actually have better principles than Mr Dutton.
Your seat. Order. Order. Across the chamber. Order. 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 Senator McKenzie. Minister, please continue.
As Mr Leese said, he went through in detail about the principles associated with the Voice. He made this point: it is like a committee. It will be a body of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians that will provide advice to the government.
Once again, Senator Cash. Senator Pratt. Minister Wong, please continue.
And as Mr Lees has said, the Voice is about advice so that governments can make better decisions that come from listening to people. I mean, it is amazing, isn't it? Mr Dutton seemed to think that—
Order.
Mr Dutton seemed to think that sorry was the end of the world, and listening to Senator Cash, you think that listening is the end of democracy. Listening is the end of democracy. We think listening to First Nations people, in order to get better outcomes, isn't a bad way to approach the disadvantage.
Thank you, Minister. I'll wait for silence before I call Senator Cash. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Specifically focusing on the Voice once again. The full Uluru Statement from the Heart makes clear, and I quote, "The Voice should be accommodated on an appropriate site within the parliamentary circle in Canberra." End quote. Has the government conducted any preliminary work to identify locations within Parliament House or nearby to accommodate the Voice? If so, what work has been done?
Before I call the Minister, I'm waiting for silence. Minister Wong.
I mean, this is the level to which someone who was once a member of the federal cabinet is prepared to see. To actually ask about that level an address.
Cash.
We have Indigenous Australians with the sorts of outcomes which are articulated in the closing the gap.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes. For all of the senators who are interjecting, may I remind you that tonight we have open-ended adjournment. If you have something to say, put your name on the list. But question time is not the time for there to be shouting across the chamber and interjections. Minister Wong.
Ahead of this referendum, which goes to whether or not we as a nation can take the invitations that First Nations leaders and representatives have made, in order to listen to people, to get better outcomes in the face of all the disadvantage that time and time again in this place we have all spoken about with such sorrow, and instead of responding to that moment, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Senate is asking about addresses. Where are you when this country needs leadership? Where is the coalition whenever this country needs leadership? You're in the dirt, as always.
Thank you, Minister. Order. Order. I am asking for silence. Senator McKenzie, I've called you several times. Senator Hughes. Senator Scarr. Order. Senator McGrath. Order. Senator Ayres, I am trying to get the chamber to order, and that interjection across the chamber was very unhelpful. Senator Faruqi.
My question is to the Leader of the Government, representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Minister, the Albanese government is continuing the Morrison government's climate-destroying gas obsession with $1.5 billion in public subsidies to develop Darwin's Middle Arm. The US gas company Tamboran wants to frack the Beetaloo and send the gas to Middle Arm, where they have access rights to build a massive gas export terminal to ship that gas overseas. Will the government continue with this $1.5 billion taxpayer corporate handout, knowing that without doubt you are enabling the expansion of gas while the planet boils?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Wong.
Thank you. I have met with the Chief Minister for the Northern Territory, I think, on her recent visit, and the point she made to me was that some of the ways in which Middle Arm is described, including in that question, don't accord with the reality of what is occurring. This is public common-use marine infrastructure. This is infrastructure that will be needed to develop clean energy industries to get to net zero. And I know that the Greens Well, no, I know that the Greens don't have to deal in government with the reality of how you transition to net zero, but we are determined as a government to do that. This facility, and I appreciate that it's a very controversial issue locally and politically, but I think we should just all take a step back and understand what is being proposed here. Public common use marine infrastructure Senator Gallagher pointed out yesterday that whenever someone doesn't agree with you, you somehow accuse them of some sort of corruption. It really is a very poor debating point. They're not a cartel, and nor are we. We just don't agree. We just don't agree with your position on this. We actually think infrastructure that will develop clean energy industries as well as enabling Australia's gas industry is part of the transition. So we don't have the same view that the Greens do on this. I'd make the point that the NT government has ensured that there are a range of industries that it is seeking to ensure a range of industries could utilise this infrastructure. We think that's appropriate, and that's what the Commonwealth investment is about.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Faruqi, first supplementary.
Minister, parents and doctors from across the country are in Parliament today to raise the alarm about the threat of middle arm. The science and scientists can't be any clearer. Any new fossil fuel project being built now will blow the government's net zero target. So what do you choose? $1.5 billion enabling a gas export terminal at Middle Arm, or your net zero target?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister Wong.
I would make the point, that I've made in here previously, and I suspect will be as successful with the Greens political party as it has been for the last decade or so, and that is that emissions under the Paris Agreement, under the UNFCCC, under the UNFCCC framework are measured in terms of emissions from entities that a country is responsible for. So obviously, you may not like it, but the world hasn't agreed with you. All right. So, and the reality is gas is a part of the transition. Of course, we need to continue to transition over time, and that's why. Well, Senator Henderson, I will remind you that, as I recall, you were supportive. Your party did support net zero by 2050, and I think you probably said so in Victoria. But if you'd like to go and explain to them that you've shifted from that position, I'd be very happy to watch that happen.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Faruqi, second supplementary.
Minister, the Antarctic is currently missing sea ice the size of Western Australia this winter, while South America is experiencing temperatures of 40 degrees in winter. Do you think that gas expansion in Middle Arm will make these trends better or worse?
Thank you, Senator Faruqi. Minister.
What we think will respond to those disasters and tragedies which are occurring exactly as scientists predicted. Exactly as science is predicted, and that we know what happened in terms of those oppositing ignoring those, is to do what we said we would do when we were elected, an ambitious program on climate, increasing our emission reductions targets of 43%, becoming one of just 33 countries to have enshrined these targets in the law of the land, bringing back the Climate Change Authority, putting net zero in the objects of the CEFC and ARENA Acts, legislating the Rewiring the Nation Fund, and so much more. That is what we will do. And what we will also do is work with the Pacific in the context of the UN Framework Convention on Climate to make sure the voices of the Pacific are elevated. That's what we will do, because we are interested in outcomes and making sure Australia contributes to the trajectory the world has to be on.
Answering has expired. Senator Sterle.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Senator Watt. We've heard already about the good news of China lifting its trade barriers in relation to barley. I note the government's support for the agriculture industry's ambition to achieve $100 billion in farm gate output by 2030. When speaking with farmers, they constantly tell me that boosting trade and market access for our premium agricultural product is critical to achieving this objective. Minister, how is the Albanese government's strong focus on improving agricultural trade outcomes benefiting farmers on the ground here in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Sterle, for asking the third question this week from Labor senators about agriculture, which I think is as many as the opposition have asked in the entire parliament. That's how interested they are in agriculture. The Albanese government, as you said, Senator Sterle, is putting the runs on the board this year to ensure Australian farmers, processors and exporters have the best possible access to international markets. Across Australia, 1 in 4 jobs relies on trade, so access to international markets is essential for the profitability of Australia's export-focused agricultural, fisheries and forestry sectors. Most recently, there have been positive developments in the reinstatement of trade in cotton, horticulture, timber and, of course, the removal of tariffs from Australian barley to China. Our calm persistence and sensible dialogue has expedited an outcome for Australian barley producers with the removal of tariff barriers. I'm aware a small number of key grains exporters are still suspended from accessing the Chinese market, and we're working with industry and the Chinese Customs Agency to ensure that all producers are now promptly registered and allowed access to the market. Just yesterday, Minister Farrell wrote to his Chinese counterpart, Minister Wen Tao, to seek his assistance to promptly conclude the relisting of these exporters. There is also, of course, more work to be done to remove the trade barriers that remain on wine, beef and lobster into the Chinese market, and the Albanese government will continue that work. While our government is working incredibly hard to restore market access with our largest trading partner, the first half of this year has also been very successful in opening the agriculture sector to new markets, as well as improving and maintaining existing markets. The barley industry has been a success story in diversification. Producers have increased their exports to the rest of the world from $400 million to $3 billion. And more broadly, our trade diversification strategy is paying dividends for Aussie farmers. Through expanding markets, the Albanese government is delivering a growth agenda for Australian agriculture.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, President. Now I note, Minister, that the National Farmers Federation's comments that, and I quote, "Scrapping these tariffs is welcome news for some 23,000 Australian grain producers," unquote, and that they support trade diversification to provide choice for farmers to make informed decisions about where to export their products. Can the minister outline what market access achievements have been made in new and expanding markets around the world?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Sterle. I'd love to do that. The Albanese government is committed to protecting and growing our agricultural trade markets, and expanding exports is a key part of that. Last year, we recorded 107 technical market access achievements worth a potential $5.47 billion, and 2023 is continuing to advance these successes. India continues to be a fruitful trading partner for Australian agriculture, and one that has massive potential as the market opens up. During my recent trip to India, where I was accompanied by about a dozen agricultural leaders, it was great to see such cooperation between our two countries. The recent Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement has seen improved conditions and new market access opened to enable trade of Australian Hass avocados, and we've also successfully removed tariffs on the export of Australian sheep meat, rock lobster, wool, most woods and pulps and hides and skins to India. New markets mean new business for Aussie farmers, and the Albanese government is delivering that.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Yes, thanks, President, and I thank the minister for that information. And you might want to listen over there. Clearly, the Albanese government is on the side of farmers and the agricultural sector, especially those looking to expand into new markets around the world. Bearing all that in mind, Minister, how is this news being received in regional Australia?
Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Sterle, I'm very glad you asked, because I think the news is being taken extremely well in regional Australia. But you don't have to take my word for it. Let me read to you, Senator Sterle, the latest editorial from the Bible of the Bush, the Land newspaper. The headline says it all. Quote, "Big barley win establishes government agricultural trade shops." And I quote, "The Chinese decision," this is from the Land, "the Chinese decision to drop its tariffs is a huge boost for the government and a blow to the opposition. The government's ability to unlock $1 billion buyer of Australian barley is a major coup. The coalition government was unable to broker an end to the crippling sanctions because of a series of perceived snubs towards China, not least from former Prime Minister Scott Morrison. The editorial in The Land goes on to say, the ALP is not traditionally regarded as the farmer's friend, but the agriculture sector has reported they have found Agriculture Minister Murray Watt genuinely engaged. Together with Trade Minister Don Farrell, who has won respect for standing firm on potential trade agreement with the EU, the government has put runs on the board with its agricultural constituents.
The time for answering has expired. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator David Pocock. Senator Pocock, please resume your seat. I just called a crossbench senator to ask his question, and there were interjections continuing. Senator McKenzie and Senator Wong. Senator Pocock, please continue.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Minister Watt. Today I will table an open letter with nearly 2,300 signatures from doctors and medical professionals. The letter calls on the government to withdraw the $1.5 billion of taxpayer funds committed to enable a gas export and petrochemical processing hub at Middle Arm. In opposition, the Prime Minister said, if there is one thing Australians have learned during the coronavirus crisis, is that we should always listen to scientists. The experts, including scientists and many doctors who have joined us in Parliament today, are saying we can't afford to proceed with this project. Minister, when will the Albanese government listen to the experts and withdraw funding for Middle Arm?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thank you, Senator Pocock, for your question. As you're aware, Senator Pocock, the government will provide $1.5 billion in planned equity to support the development of the Middle Arm precinct, together with $440 million for regional logistics hubs along key transport links to connect Katherine, Alice Springs and Tennant Creek to Darwin. One thing I do want to be clear about, and this is sometimes lost in the debate, is that this investment is not an investment in fracking, and it's very disingenuous that some people continue to ignore facts and fail to engage in the detail of the proposition that the Australian government has put to the Northern Territory government. What we are proposing is to make an equity investment in common-use marine infrastructure that includes specialist product wharves, modular offloading facilities for manufacturing and dredging of the shipping channel. Now, in fact, contrary to what many people are saying, our funding will go towards infrastructure that supports industries that are critical to meet our commitment to net zero. And those industries include hydrogen and the manufacture and export of lithium batteries. So I know it suits the Greens Party and a range of other people to characterise this investment as one thing, but in fact this investment is actually critical to meet the commitment that we have, and I thought certain other people had, to reaching net zero, including by supporting hydrogen development and the manufacture and export of lithium batteries. The proposals involved include a hydrogen facility using solar energy, green ammonia production, critical minerals processing for use in energy storage batteries and precursor battery materials, and the manufacturing of these products. The truth is that gas does remain an important energy source for Australia and our trading partners during the transition to net zero and decarbonisation. A lower CO2 emission liquefied natural gas export facility is also one of the proposals. This is about moving towards net zero, not against it.
I called the end of the chamber to order several times. I remind you, questions and answers, when they're asked, need to be done so with silence from the chamber. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Nearly 100 doctors from the NT and around the country, and dozens of parents from the NT have travelled here to raise their concerns. If Middle Arm goes ahead, it will likely become Australia's next cancer alley, and children will have higher likelihood of leukemia, premature birth, lung disease, heart disease and stroke. Minister, is the government being negligent funding this project, given that you know that these will be the outcomes for people living in Darwin?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Watt.
We don't accept that, do we? Yeah. Thank you, Senator Pocock, and I accept that both you and the people who've travelled to Canberra to voice their opinions are sincere in their beliefs, but they are not beliefs that are shared by the Australian government. As I say, this development from our point of view, is all about helping facilitate the transition towards a net zero economy. And I know, Senator Pocock, that's something that you believe in. That's certainly something that the Labor Party agrees in, and I'm sure that the people who've come to Canberra to speak with people share that view as well. This development, as I say, is about things like investing and developing hydrogen facilities using solar energy, green ammonia production, critical minerals processing for use in energy storage batteries. These are the kind of things that we are going to need if we are actually going to achieve the net zero transition that I believe in, that I think you believe in, and I'm sure that the people who've come to Canberra believe in.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Pocock's second supplementary. Thank
you, President. Minister, your greenwashing is outrageous. You know that this will process gas primarily. Tambourines saying that Santos have plans for Barossa that will have real impacts for people in Darwin, people in the Beetaloo. Stop gaslighting us. Will the government undertake a health impact assessment of Middle Arm as demanded by doctors across Australia, including from within the NT, before the environmental impact statement is released?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Watt.
Thank you again, Senator Pocock. Well, as you have pointed out, there is yet to be an environmental impact statement undertaken in relation to this development, and that is something that will occur in due course, that I know that Minister Plibersek will oversee in her usual very professional fashion. And very often those sorts of environmental assessments do consider the sorts of health issues that you're talking about. So we are fully committed, as we are with any project, to make sure that, that the environmental sustainability of projects is fully assessed before they are approved. More broadly, though, as you may be aware, Senator Pocock, the Albanese government has made climate change a national health priority by developing—
Pardon, Senator Watt. Sorry. Senator Pocock.
Thank you, President. Just a point of order on relevance. I was really keen to hear if you will commit to a health impact assessment.
I believe the minister went to the answer to that question in the first part of his question, but I will. Senator Pocock's not an opportunity to argue with me. I will remind the minister of the question. Minister.
Thanks, President. And like you, I think I have answered Senator Pocock's question by pointing to the EIS that is to be undertaken, and as I say, it would be the usual course that health impacts are considered as part of that. But as I say, the Albanese government has made climate change a national health priority by developing Australia's first national health and climate strategy. Thank
you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Babet.
My question is for the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Minister Watt, once again. Now, Minister, I understand that you've previously discussed the topic of livestock mRNA vaccines at one of your agricultural minister meetings. Now, can you provide us an update on the progress of mRNA for livestock, which are intended for human consumption? Have any trials of mRNA vaccine commenced in Australia for livestock? If not, are you going to commence them? If you are going to do it, for how long, etc.? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thank you, Senator Babet. Senator Babet, I note that you now join Labor senators in asking questions about agriculture, and I look forward to the National Party one day joining you in sharing your interest in the agriculture sector of Australia. But maybe we'll get there one day. And again, Senator Babet, I know that the issues around vaccines are something that is of great interest to you. I can inform you that currently there are no mRNA vaccines currently registered for use in livestock in Australia, and there are no vaccines that are mandatory for any Australian livestock under the Biosecurity Act. I'm certainly aware, like you, Senator Babet, of some discussion that is occurring and some trials and things like that in relation to mRNA vaccines, and there is a lot of interest about that in the agriculture community and the wider community. I'm aware that a research project funded by Meat and Livestock Australia is currently being undertaken by the New South Wales Government, and that project has commenced trials on the immunological response to an mRNA vaccine construct in Canada. So there is work starting to happen with Australian industry in partnership with state governments on these issues. But at the moment, these trials are being undertaken to determine whether mRNA vaccines are safe and effective for animals. I think implicit in your question was an acknowledgement that we do need to make sure that as new vaccines and products come online, that they are safe both for livestock and for the humans who may go on to consume that livestock in the form of meat. The Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority has the role of evaluating the safety and efficacy of veterinary vaccines and chemicals before permitting or registering them for use, and that includes whether meat from animals vaccinated with mRNA vaccines would be safe to eat. So I think it's fair to say that we're at a very early stage of looking at what mRNA vaccines can do, and the safety of animals and humans is paramount.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Babet, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. Now, my next question would be, of course, now, if we ever do approve mRNA for animals, if that day comes, or rather when that day comes, I have the feeling is a better way to put it, will your government, if you're still in government, would you commit to labelling food products made from animals that have been injected with mRNA? Because I don't want to eat that stuff, and I think there's a lot of people that don't want to eat that stuff either.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Babet, and I do look forward to a long period of the Albanese government, and I look forward to receiving questions from you for a long time to come as well. Matters of labelling, as you're probably aware, Senator Babet, are also the responsibility of the APVMA, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, and one of the things that they take into account in authorising a product for use is its safety, and they also have responsibility around the labelling of those products to make sure that consumers are fully informed of what they're buying, and to make sure that farmers are fully aware of what they may be using in their farming activities. But mRNA is a natural part of all animal bodies. The safety and efficacy of mRNA vaccines developed for use in animals will be assessed as part of any registration process. Australia's food safety standards are strictly applied for all food intended for human consumption, and I can certainly assure you and the broader public that we'll be taking the safety matters that you're concerned about into account.
Senator Babet, second supplementary.
All right, Minister. Now, let's say that one day mRNA is being injected into livestock. It's going to be used for human consumption. It's very realistic that this could happen. If this does happen, will you or will your government ever seek to make it mandatory for producers to inject their animals, much like you kind of made it mandatory, well, all of you here, mandatory for people, otherwise they lose their jobs, etc. Will you make it mandatory for animals?
Thank you, Minister Wong.
Point of order about that question, and I appreciate that the Minister, I'm sure, will answer what he's able to, but I think it is by definition a hypothetical question.
Yes, it is a hypothetical question. Senator Babet, the minister may choose to answer it, or you can. Minister Wong, I need to call you. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. As I said, Senator Babet, through the chair, I'm sure that Senator Watt will answer what he is able to, but I do think, as a matter of practice, we ought not. It's incumbent on me to raise for the President that the question is hypothetical and as such is not in order.
Thank you, Senator Wong. I'm going to invite the minister to answer the parts of the question he can. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Babet. As has been observed, there's a lot of if, buts and maybes in that question, but the broad point I think you're making is whether I can see a day when it would be mandatory to inject for livestock producers to inject mRNA into their animals, and the short answer to that question is no. As I've said in answer to your earlier questions, before an agricultural or veterinary chemical product can be legally supplied, sold or used in Australia, it must be registered by the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority or approved for use under permit. The APVMA has advised that they have not registered or approved under permit any mRNA veterinary vaccines in Australia. As I've pointed out, we're at a very early stage, and in particular the project and the research that's undertaken at the moment is about ensuring the safety of using mRNA vaccines, both in terms of the safety of livestock and the safety of humans who would go on to consume that livestock.
Thank you, Minister. Before I call you, Senator Lambie, I wish to draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the gallery of a Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade-hosted United States Congressional Staff delegation. And on behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and, in particular, to the Senate. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome. Last week it was revealed in the Saturday paper. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Veterans Affairs, Minister Wong. Last week it was revealed in the Saturday paper the Department of Veterans Affairs has routinely transferred the very private and personal medical data of Australian veterans to the University of South Australia. This data was transferred without knowledge of or consent from any of the veterans whose information was released. None of this data has been de-identified. This realisation has come as a huge shock to the veteran community, as you can imagine. While they are unsurprised that the department has breached their trust in this way, they are very concerned at the lack of transparency regarding the transfer of this data. What exactly is being held by the University of South Australia and what is it being used for?
Thank you. Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thanks to Senator Lambie for her question. I think she has made a contribution either earlier this week or last week about this issue and acknowledge her continued advocacy on behalf of our veteran community. She does, I think, a great job on that front. And I know how much it is appreciated. I will have to take some of the detail of the question on notice because the information I have is insufficient to respond fully to your question, Senator Lambie. What I would say is I understand the Veterans Mates program, which is what this refers to, has in fact been in place for some time, I think since the Howard government. I do have information that there has been an acknowledged privacy breach of an individual and that the department has recognised the distress this has caused, and I think an apology it has been issued or there has been communication from the department. I'm also advised the department has commissioned an external review of its privacy settings and procedures late 2022 as a result of these matters and has implemented its recommendations. What I don't have is a direct response to the broader issue about the totality of the data and the extent to which there has been anything that untoward occur in relation to that data. So I will ask the Secretary at the Department, the Minister for Veterans Affairs, to ask his department to provide me with an answer on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Mates page on the Department of Veterans Affairs claims, and I quote, the program provides information and resources to health professionals, pharmacists, our clients including veterans and their dependents. There is no mention of the University of South Australia. Could you please inform the veterans why that website has not been updated, that their information has been going to the University of South Australia?
Minister Wong.
I'm not familiar with the website. The information I have is that the DV, Department of Veterans Affairs, and the University have strict policies in place to ensure the appropriate protection of personal information, and ethics approval remains in place, guiding the delivery of the program to the benefit of the veterans community. Identified data is only used to write to veterans who are at risk of medicine-related problems and to the veterans doctor to encourage a positive conversation tailored to the veteran's specific healthcare needs. I am also advised that the program uses health billing data, not health professional notes, to identify those at risk, and the information I have, which I don't think is consistent with the proposition you just put to me, so I will need to understand that, is that all other data used in the program is de-identified.
Senator Lambie's second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. My office is receiving calls and emails from veterans with attachments from the University of South Australia itself to advise it is demanding payment from veterans who are seeking information on how their records have been used and who else they have been sent to. Does the government have any idea why Australian veterans are being asked to pay for access to medical data held by the university when it is the veterans' own data that was never approved to go out in the first place?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Senator, as you would probably gather, I don't have any information in relation to charging for the data in the brief from the department. So I will have to take that part of your question on notice.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Bilyk.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Given it has been nearly a decade since there was a long-term international development policy to drive the government's development assistance, can the minister outline how the Albanese government is restoring Australia's international leadership and advancing Australia's interests in a peaceful, stable and prosperous region through our new international policy, and how this will ensure we are a partner of choice in our region?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Wong.
I thank Senator Bilyk for her question, for her interest in this matter, and I thank all of my colleagues for their support for a development program that is both serves our national interest and the interests of our partner countries. And you know, we do believe on this side of the chamber that we should deploy all elements of our national power to advance Australia's interests, to shape our region and the world for the better. And the new international development policy is the first long-term policy in almost a decade. Will deliver a development program that is effective, responsive, transparent and accountable. I think we've all spoken in this place and beyond that we face the most challenging strategic circumstances in many generations. That's why we have to deploy all aspects of our national power, all tools of statecraft to help shape the region we want, a region that reflects Australia's national interests and the shared interests of the region. And that includes our development program, because development underpins stability. So Minister Conroy and I in government have had a clear purpose of revitalising Australia's development policy and funding. Australia will offer genuine partnerships based on respect, listening and learning from each other. We will support local leaders to create local solutions while contributing to our own strengths, our economy, our institutions and the connections and knowledge of Australians. Unfortunately, after a decade of denial and disrespect from those opposite, we are committed to working respectfully with our regional partners. We are committed to supporting our regional partners address the biggest threat to our region, which is climate change. New targets will also ensure our development assistance tackles climate impacts and improves the lives of women and girls. A new performance and delivery framework will guide the implementation of policy. It is an international development policy fit for the challenges and opportunities of our time.
Has expired. Senator Bilyk, first supplementary.
Thank you for that answer, Minister. I've noticed that the Albanese government has delivered long-term growth to Australia's official development assistance program over the last 2 budgets. Can the minister outline how the Albanese government has rebuilt and stabilised Australia's development program?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Wong.
President, what we know is those opposite, for 9 long years, played the toxic politics of negative globalism. That's right. It's the same sort of strategy we've seen from them on so many issues when the national interest is engaged. And on this front, what we saw is the slashing of our development assistance by $11.8 billion. Shocking. Despite our region becoming more competitive, those opposite refused to reverse their cuts to development. And you know what those cuts did? They damaged our credibility. They damaged our national interests. They were a reduction in Australia's influence and national power, and they left a vacuum for others to fill. Over 2 budgets, the Albanese government has rebuilt the ODA program, an important step towards the goal of making Australia more influential and stronger in the world. We look forward.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Bilyk, second supplementary.
Thank you again, Minister. I understand the Albanese government engaged extensively with stakeholders on the international development policy and development finance review. Can the minister outline some of the responses from the sector who have waited almost a decade for a long-term development policy?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister.
The Albanese government's new development policy and development finance review, which we are releasing today, was informed by consultations in Australia and with our counterparts across the region. As the Australian Council for International Development, ACFIT, the aid sector's peak body, said today, it warmly welcomes the release of the new development policy. In particular, the policy is noteworthy for its focus on climate as a major driver of instability and a challenge for our times. Bridie Rice, the Chief Executive of the Development Intelligence Lab, said the policy sets out a good faith, transparent and long-term approach to development that can help create a peaceful, stable and prosperous region which serves Australia's national interests. I look forward to meeting with more sector representatives alongside parliamentary colleagues at our official launch this afternoon, and together we will work to rebuild support for Australia's development program. And I would invite, noting Senator Birmingham's comments today, him and those opposite to join us in the rebuilding of that program.
Time for answering has expired. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Will the Albanese Labor government be changing Australia's position in terms of how we describe Israeli settlements as being legal or not under international law? Will the Albanese Labor government also be changing Australia's position to formally recognise such territories as occupied Palestinian territories?
Minister Wong.
I thank the senator for the question, and I acknowledge his interest and expertise in national security and foreign affairs matters. And what I would say to him is that this government is guided by the principle of advancing the cause of peace and progress towards a just and enduring two-state solution. And it is clear that viewing the conflict from one perspective will not achieve such peace, and any lasting solution to the conflict cannot be at the expense of either Palestinians or Israelis. The conflict is a matter to be resolved through negotiations between the parties. Now, I've outlined our principal position, and what I would say to the senator is that we have taken steps consistent with these principles. We have reaffirmed Australia's previous long-standing and bipartisan position that Jerusalem is a final status issue. We recognise this is a deeply felt issue for many, and there are a few issues more central to the Jewish people than the status of Jerusalem. We have rebalanced Australia's positions in international forums while opposing anti-Israel bias in the UN. We have called out unilateral actions that undermine the prospects of peace. We unequivocally condemn all forms of terrorism and violence against civilians in Israel and in the occupied Palestinian territories, and have repeatedly called on both Israeli and Palestinian leaders to take immediate steps to halt the violence. We are gravely concerned about alarming trends that are significantly reducing the prospects of peace. We are deeply concerned by the Israeli government settlement activity, including its advancements of thousands of settlement units, retroactive legalisation of illegal outputs and policy changes. The Australian government is strengthening its opposition to settlements by affirming they are illegal under international law and a significant obstacle to peace. This is consistent with the position of past governments, reflects legal advice and UN Security Council resolutions which determine that the settlements have no legal validity and constitute a violation of international law.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Fawcett, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, the media is reporting the things you have described and saying that the government will recognise certain territories as occupied Palestinian territory. Has the government determined precise boundaries for these territories? And if so, how has such determination been anything other than, as the Minister has previously said, a unilateral action which reduces the prospects of a just two-state solution?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister Wong.
Australia is proposing to adopt, or will be adopting or returning to, the term occupied Palestinian territories. And the point I'd make to the senator is that is consistent with UN Security Council resolutions. It is consistent with the approach taken by key partners, including the United Kingdom, New Zealand and the European Union. So this is a term which has been used, including on past occasions by past foreign ministers and past governments, that is consistent with much of the nomenclature that is used within the UN context and is used, as I said, by key partners including the United Kingdom, New Zealand and the European Union. In adopting the term, we are clarifying that the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, were occupied by Israel following the 1967 war, and that the occupation continues and reaffirms our commitment to negotiate a two-state solution in which Israel and a future Palestinian state coexist.
Senator Fawcett, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. As the Minister has said, this is a sensitive topic, both in the community internationally and within political parties, including the Minister's own. Given the timing leading up to the national conference for the Labor Party, could you detail for the Senate, in terms of numbers of meetings, correspondence including email, face-to-face meetings, the extent of consultation with the Israeli government, Palestinian representatives and leaders within the Labor Party factional system?
Minister Wong.
I think the only matter that is properly within my portfolio is the engagement I've had with the ambassador and/or DFAT has had with the Israeli embassy, and I will obtain those details. I can confirm there has been engagement with the ambassador, and that's because we do remain a committed friend of Israel's. We do. And we recognise Israel's right to defend itself. We recognise the uniquely challenging security environment, and we continue to call out this is not a partisan issue.
Order.
This is not a partisan issue. Australia does continue to call out unfair and disproportionate targeting of Israel in international forums. We have opposed the referral of the conflict to the ICJ because we do not believe that will bring parties closer to negotiations, and we will continue to fight anti-Semitism. It is a friendship that has been and should remain based on a shared commitment to democracy and the rule of law. And that is the approach we are taking. And I ask that further questions be placed on notice.